I think the reason that we destroyed the Soviet Union, which I consider the worst mistake ever made by the United States.
Why do you think that's the worst mistake?
Is because the Soviet Union and the United States could have and should have and would have eventually combined their forces against these Nordics. I think that what John F. Kennedy wanted to do and what his brother RFK was going to resume as policy was an alliance with the Soviet Union. After all, remember, we had fought the Nazis together with the Soviet Union. Was an alliance with the Soviet Union where we would both go to the moon together, and if necessary, we would both defend the freedom and independence of humanity using nuclear weapons together against this threat. And as bad as some people think communism is, I mean, I'm no communist, I'm no fan of communism, but look at the Soviet cosmism and how progressive it is.
But JFK was trying to defang the American nuclear arsenal. So if he actually viewed the Nordics as some sort of threat, he was trying to disarm.
In no way do I believe for a minute that JFK would have been one of these total nuclear disarmament people. I don't buy it.
You don't think so?
I don't buy it. I think he would have built an alliance with the Soviet Union where our respective arsenals are not principally aimed at each other. But remember, going back to Ian Fleming and Spectre, I think JFK figured it out, or had it told to them by Eisenhower, that there's this third power in the world.
Because he had these back channels with Khrushchev, and this guy Norman Cousins, who was a family friend, was going back and forth. And the rumor was that he wanted full détente and disarmament.
And he wanted to go to the moon with the Russians.
Yeah, he wanted to do some sort of cooperative space program. But that, but still the nuclear disarmament part would go against some sort of belief that, we were trying to defend ourselves against some alien.
In any case, the reason I think that it was the worst mistake we ever made is because there are far worse things than Soviet communism. And Nazism is one of them, in my view. That kind of, SS fascist mentality, it's worse than Soviet cosmism and like what Konstantin Tsiolkovsky wanted for the future of mankind. I mean, in my view.
Well, I think the Tsiolkovsky stuff is interesting, but this communism, both are horrible, but communism killed more people.
I know.
And way more globally.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily the measure of the ethics of a system.
Okay.
Like, for example, so I don't want to linger on this for a very long time, but I'll give you very short. Okay.
Yeah.
Suppose that the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria had metastasized and we weren't able to contain it. And that, let's say, they succeeded in toppling the Saudi royal family. And you saw recently how Saudi Arabia and Pakistan made this strategic alliance where now Saudi Arabia is protected by Pakistan's nuclear weapons. And besides, it's been rumored for years that Saudi Arabia paid for Pakistan's nuclear weapons to be developed. So they have Saudi barcodes on them. So suppose ISIS succeeded in taking over the, Riyadh and then subsequently Mecca and Medina. And then they wind up with Pakistan's nuclear arsenal. And we get this metastasizing Islamic State in the world, right? Well, you know what? It would be necessary to go to war with that thing. And a lot of people will be dead as a result of that. Now, is that because of the evils of American liberal capitalism? No, it's because we had to deal with a very difficult problem. Okay? And we would be doing it to defend human freedom and progress. From their own perspective, the Soviets considered themselves to be the standard bearers of liberation from oppression and progress, including scientific and technological innovation, against forces of regression and tyranny, right? And, to give them some credit, look, they put women in space before we did, okay? So I think that, this decision to dismantle the Soviet Union was horrendous, and I think it was very deliberate. And guess who was behind it? Well, a principal figure, behind the death blow. Because look, it's one thing to keep them as an enemy. It's good to have them as an enemy. You want to have good rivals.
Who would you say is behind?
We have a shit rival today. China is a shit rival to have. Because it is a collectivistic, hive-minded, Confucianist, regressive, traditionalist society, fundamentally. It's no longer Maoist, by the way. It's morphed into some kind of national socialism that's extremely Confucianist and collectivist. That's a shit rival to have. You want to have a rival that makes you the best you can be. And the Soviets were that. We kept each other on our toes.
Yeah. Now we're in all these sort of bad games, local games with the Chinese, where it's like the AGI race. Right. You could say the modern academia in the U.S. is kind of like the Confucian bureaucracy or something. You know, I think a lot of people care a lot about IQ and like, genetic engineering, like, which is, probably not the race you want to be running or whatever. You could think of social media in the U.S. as like a version of the social credit score or something. So there are a lot of these weird analogs that, it's not great. And then like, in kind of the COVID paradigm, like they have a surveillance state and then it's like, now we have one. And
so the Soviets were a good rival. They were a good rival. We should have kept them as that. Instead of like this retarded traditionalist Russia that we have now, neo-Orthodox czarist system under Putin. This is a disaster. And it was done deliberately. And who dealt the death blow? George H.W. Bush, whose father, Prescott Bush, was one of Hitler's men in America. Okay? So, and of course, he was the head of the CIA. George H.W. Bush was one of these American presidents who actually had full access to the UFO file because he had been briefed when he was deep in the deep state. Okay? And there's connections, from him to the Kennedy assassination. And so.
Yeah, he went missing when Kennedy was assassinated. And then he was supposed to brief, I think Carter wanted him to brief him on UFOs, but he wanted to be, made director of the CIA, which he eventually was made director, but like, there was this sort of quid pro quo thing there.
And I believe it's been since confirmed that he was in Dallas. He was in Dallas when.
He definitely was in Dallas, I think. And I think he met with everybody on Clint Murchison's ranch or something around that time too. And yeah, I mean, it would have made sense. He was like the Skull and Bones kid who he was in with, James Jesus Angleton, who was a Dulles acolyte. And
he's the second politician to ever use the term New World Order in a speech.
Interesting.
The first being Adolf Hitler.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's fascinating.
Okay. So that's who dealt the death blow to the Soviet Union. And I think it was a huge mistake.
That's really interesting. So you think that was part of some sort of one world order plan or something?
Yeah, absolutely.
Fascinating. Well, I don't know. I mean, they say that it was like, the priest, the general, and the businessman or whatever. It was an alliance between, multiple different factions in the U.S. that united, the country against communism at the time. So, but you're saying that George H.W.
The country was always united against communism.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we shouldn't have had the Soviet Union as a rival.
You're saying the escalation and the escalation in the 80s.
Yeah, and the decision to really collapse the system, the Soviet system, which, by the way, what we did to bring that about was horrendously unethical, namely the creation of Al-Qaeda, the United States creation of Al-Qaeda in Pakistan, to send them into Afghanistan to make something viable from out of the Taliban to fight the Soviets in a protracted war of attrition, to demoralize the Soviet citizenry and bankrupt the Soviet Union and eventually collapse the system.
But wasn't that, I don't know, an example of like a triple bank shot gone wrong or something? Like, that is true that like we trained the Mujahideen and trained Osama bin Laden. And
there were multiple kinds of Mujahideen. Like some of them, Ahmad Shah Massoud, leading the Northern Alliance, was a decent guy. And the CIA killed him right before 9/11. Okay? We wiped, the United States wiped out all the moderate elements in Afghanistan and sent in Al-Qaeda to train all the most rabid Islamic fundamentalists, and did this for the explicit purpose of defeating the Soviet Union, as if a Soviet Afghanistan would have been a bad thing. Afghanistan becoming a province of the Soviet Union would have been the best thing that ever happened to the Afghan people.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And this was like Charlie Wilson's war or whatever, and what was it, 79 or?
Yeah. 77, 79, yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Okay. Who is David Paulides?
Well, one of the most disturbing aspects of the close encounter phenomenon is its intersection with missing persons cases. So there's this researcher, David Paulides, David Paulides, who has written a whole series of books called Missing 411, Missing 411 series of books, exhaustively researched. He's been to all the national parks in the country, which, unbeknownst to most people, are hotspots for disappearances of large numbers of individuals go missing in our national parks.
Yeah.
And the devil's in the details of these cases, because you have to look at how well trained some of these hikers or hunters are who disappear and leave their provisions behind.
Yeah, like sometimes folded perfectly intact.
Uneaten food.
Yeah.
So presume if they were, there's no remains, not like a bear ate them or something. And, if they were starving out there for days, you expect that their candy bar wouldn't be left or whatever, And they leave their weapons behind. And their stuff is littered over large distances in some cases. Some of the worst cases are ones involving children, where like a child will go off a trail at, let's say, a summer camp that's on the edge of a national park, and the child will go missing. And then the child's body will be found thousands of feet higher. But not until months later. So the search services will come in and they'll scour the entire area. There won't be a single trace of this kid. Then, like after a hiatus of weeks or months, remains of the kid will be found, but like at a much higher elevation, like it was dropped there.
Whoa.
Okay. And long story short, I mean, I cite this in some detail in Closer Encounters, David Politis' various books. But he discovered a connection between this and Close Encounters, where in the same areas people will go missing, people saw UFOs. And he also discovered that the feds have case files on this and they're hiding them.
Interesting.
Federal authorities, particularly the FBI, has a whole archive of this type of material.
Whoa.
Which they are keeping secret, of people who have gone missing in national parks and potential connection to the close encounter phenomenon. So, and one of the most interesting things about this is temporal disorientation. So, for example, there's one case where some young woman, not everyone goes missing. Sometimes they go in the twilight zone for 48 hours and they come out.
Yeah.
So
Travis Walton's a classic example in Arizona.
Yeah, that's right.
Different parts of the brain have different activities.